You don't have an addiction problem. You have a pain problem. That urge that keeps pulling you back to the same destructive behavior. It's not weakness. It's a survival strategy. You weren't born chasing alcohol, porn, food, or constant stimulation. You were born looking for connection. And somewhere along the way, you stopped finding it. Maybe no one taught you how to sit with sadness. Maybe your anger was punished, your sensitivity was mocked, your needs were too much. So your nervous system found a shortcut: numb the noise. If you like this type of video, don't forget to click the like and subscribe button. Addiction isn't a character flaw, it's an adaptation, a response to an emotional wound that never got to speak. So now it screams through your habits. Carl Jung saw this long before neuroscience caught up. He said addiction isn't just a behavior, it's a spiritual cry, a soul looking for the sacred and finding only substitutes. You think you're craving a drink? Number. You're craving peace. You're craving silence. You're craving the moment when your body finally stops being a war zone. Dr. Gabor Mate echoes this when he says, "The question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. Because that's the real enemy, not the substance, not the compulsion, the pain beneath it, the one no one saw, the one you learned to carry quietly. So before you judge yourself, pause. Before you shame yourself for relapsing again, ask, what am I trying not to feel? Because the addiction isn't random, it's precise. It goes exactly where the wound is. You're not broken. You're protecting yourself the only way you know how. But protection is not the same as healing. And that is where this journey begins." Carl Jung saw something that modern psychiatry often avoids. Addiction isn't just psychological, it's spiritual. He called it spiritus contra spiritum, the true spirit in conflict with the false one. In simple terms, addiction is the soul's attempt to return to something sacred through a shortcut that slowly kills it. That hit, that drink, that binge. It's not about pleasure, it's about transcendence. For a moment, your mind goes quiet. The body softens. The past disappears. You feel, even if briefly, like you've escaped gravity. But it never lasts. Because what you're chasing isn't the substance. It's the state, the altered consciousness, the expanded perception, the temporary illusion of being whole. Jung believed addicts weren't degenerates or weak-willed losers. He believed they were mystics in exile, spiritual seekers who denied the tools of inner connection, settled for chemicals, compulsions, and chaos. And that changes everything, because it means your addiction isn't random. It's ritual. It's a failed rite of passage, a desperate attempt to make contact with something larger than yourself. You don't want the bottle. You want peace. You don't want the screen. You want silence. You don't want the high. You want to feel alive. But you were never taught how to touch those states without destroying yourself in the process. So your brain rewired itself to reach for the fastest, loudest, most accessible spirit it could find. But the false spirit always betrays. It numbs, then drains. It soothes, then enslaves. It gives, then devours. Until you realize you've been trying to remember who you are using something that only makes you forget. The question is no longer, how do I stop using? The real question is, how do I reconnect with what I was really looking for? Before the first drink, there was silence. Before the first binge, there was emptiness. Before the first compulsive habit, there was pain, a kind you didn't know how to name. No one is born addicted. Addiction is learned, not through words, but through wounds. And the first wound is usually invisible. It begins early, sometimes in the crib, when a child cries and no one comes, when joy is ignored, when rage is punished, when sadness is met with "stop being dramatic." The child doesn't stop feeling, the child stops showing, and that's where the fracture begins. Gabor Mate spent decades working with people on the edge, drug users, prisoners, the homeless, and he found one pattern in all of them: pain. Not always visible trauma, but emotional starvation. Lack of connection, lack of safety, lack of being seen. Here's the brutal truth. Addiction is not about pleasure. It's about anesthesia. It's about numbing what was never validated. You weren't addicted to the substance. You were addicted to the absence of pain, even if that absence only lasted a few minutes. A child who grows up emotionally neglected learns one thing very early. My feelings are too much, so I need to disappear. And you did, piece by piece. Until one day, you found something, a drink, a pill, a pattern, that made you feel something, or nothing, and that felt safer than feeling everything. But here's the problem. Your nervous system doesn't forget. Your body remembers every unmet need, every suppressed scream, and it keeps looking for resolution until you give it one. So the question isn't, what's wrong with me? The question is, what happened to me that made me need to escape myself? There's a part of you you've buried, not because you wanted to, but because at some point it wasn't safe to be seen. The anger you weren't allowed to express, the fear you had to swallow, the shame you never named, the desires that made you feel guilty. They didn't disappear, they became your shadow. Carl Jung called it the shadow self. Everything about you that your conscious mind refuses to accept, not because it's evil, but because it was unacceptable to your parents, to society, to your inner judge. But here's the twist. What you push into the shadow doesn't vanish. It festers, it grows teeth, and it starts to leak out through sabotage, anxiety, overthinking, and addiction. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's what addiction is. Not a choice, not a lack of will, but your unconscious fighting to be seen, fighting through cravings, through patterns you swore to break, through compulsions you don't understand. Think about it. How many times have you said, "I won't do this again," and then did it anyway? That's not failure. That's the shadow taking the wheel. You try to outrun it, out-discipline it, out-motivate it. But it doesn't work, because what you resist persists. Addiction isn't the enemy, it's the smoke. The fire is the part of you you refuse to look at, the memory, the emotion, the identity you thought you had to kill to survive. But here's the paradox. The very thing you're running from is the doorway to freedom. Because when you face the shadow, it stops owning you. It becomes part of your power, not your prison. And until you do that, every attempt to quit will just be another way to avoid the truth. You've been told healing is an upward path, that if you just rise enough, think positive enough, distract yourself long enough, you'll overcome. But Carl Jung shattered that illusion with a single sentence. No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. And this hell, your hell, is not metaphorical. It's the real place inside you where you locked away everything you couldn't handle. The panic attacks you dismissed, the grief you buried, the guilt that grew claws in the silence. You keep trying to escape it, through habits, self-help mantras, even spiritual bypassing. But none of it works, because the only way out is in. Recovery doesn't begin when you stop using. It begins when you stop running. When, for the first time, you sit with the pain instead of sedating it. When you feel the scream behind the silence, and you don't turn away. It's not glamorous. It's not fast. It's brutal. And at times, it will feel like dying. But what's actually dying is the false self, the mask you wore to survive, the coping identity built on avoidance and shame. Real healing isn't about conquering addiction. It's about reconciling with the wounded part of you that created it. Addiction is not a war to win. It's a map, a distorted guide that shows you where it hurts, where it lacks, where it still bleeds. And if you're willing to descend, without shortcuts, without illusions, you'll find something you've never truly felt. Yourself. Not the performance, not the persona, but the one who survived it all. The descent is terrifying, but it's also sacred, because only in the dark can you reclaim what you lost in the light. Freedom doesn't begin when the craving stops. It begins when you realize you're not the craving. For years, you thought the addiction defined you, the failures, the relapses, the shame you carried like a second skin. But the truth is this: you are not your compulsions. You are the awareness behind them, the one who watches, the one who chooses, the one who, deep down, still wants to come home. Carl Jung didn't believe healing meant becoming perfect. He believed healing meant becoming whole, integrating the shadow, reclaiming the parts you exiled, not to erase the pain, but to stop letting it run your life. Recovery isn't a victory lap. It's a quiet reunion with yourself. And it starts when you stop asking, how do I fix myself? And start asking, how do I return to myself? Because addiction isn't the disease. Disconnection is. From your body, from your truth, from the sacred silence you've been trying to recreate through dopamine. But what you've been chasing out there has always been inside, not in a bottle, not in a browser, not in someone else's validation, but in your breath, in your story, in your presence. Freedom is not the absence of struggle. It's the capacity to feel and stay, to hold space for your anger, your sadness, your hunger, without needing to escape. And that doesn't happen in a single breakthrough. It happens moment by moment, in the choice to stay present, in the decision to reconnect. You are not bad, you are wounded, you are not broken, you are fragmented, you are not alone, you are human. Like all of us, just trying to make your way back home. And the fact that you made it to the end of this journey, that means something in you is already healing. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.